So, welcome you all to the Weather and Drones panel here at the Georgia Drone Summit. I want to remind you all, if you are social media inclined, the hashtag is hashtag Georgia Drone Summit. It's on your tag there, so if you want to tweet out or follow along with what's going on, I encourage you all to do so. My name is Dr. Marshall Shepard. I am a professor here at the University of Georgia in Athens and the director of the Atmospheric Sciences program and a professor also in the geography department. I also host a show on the Weather Channel called Weather Geeks every Sunday at noon. I want to introduce our panel today. First, we have Jim Robinson.
That's where you're from.
Yeah, that's where I'm from. And I am, Jim is with, I guess, the Weather Company?
The Weather Company, yeah. She's also owned by IBM.
Right, so just a little history of definitely IBM, but it's just sort of an evolution of what was a larger company that involved the Weather Channel as well. We have Doug Evans from Fox 5 in Atlanta. Many of you are probably familiar with Doug, as well as Tony Thomas from WSB Channel 2. We are going to have brief remarks by each of our panelists, so we'll start with Jim, and then after that we'll open it up to a more round-robin discussion, including you all.
Yeah, so we're going to do this really in a very flexible, open way. We're not going to try to make this we're just going to present to you. We're going to try to do this a little more fun. I did present a couple of things that I just want to sort of set up what the whole point of drones and weather are really, what we're really talking about here. And from my standpoint,
yeah, we can bring up his slides now.
Yeah, oh, is there a clicker? I think there is a clicker. Oh, there's a clicker. Thank you. All right, technology. So this is something that this is sort of our mantra as we cover storms and like Dr. Shepard said, we're owned by IBM. So we're the digital properties of the Weather Channel brand. So weather.com, the app, which everybody has, right? You can download it right now, that's fine. You don't listen to me. But so this is the biggest thing, we're not only here.
By the way, they want us to keep talking to this because they're recording.
So we're not only here for the fans as something big and possibly catastrophic is happening. We want to be around, especially afterwards when folks really need us the most. This is where the impact of the stories is something that we're really keeping a close tie on. Hopefully this works. Yes, okay. So does anyone remember a little storm called Irma? She wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. You never call them by she.
That's right.
And this is something that we had actually gotten. This is footage from what we call storm chasers, storm trackers. It's LSM, a company we use a lot. They are covering the nation, more storms than I can think of. But they're out there covering everything, hurricanes, tornadoes, severe weather. This was an image that I saw coming through. It was actually an email that came into my inbox, and I looked at this and I thought, oh my God, this is not good. This is really not good. Because you think wind and rain and everything else it's terrible, but it's really after it stops that it becomes very freaky and really terrifying. So this is an image that was starting to burn into our memories a little bit, and I really wanted to bring that up as the way that we are handling these kinds of things now. So, and I apologize. I'm going to try to, I don't have my notes in front of me, so I'm going to, don't mind me. Remember what I said? It's going to be all like open fun, right? All right. The biggest thing about drones and journalism, especially when you're covering weather, is the perspective that we now have, right? So before you can think of, I'm just going to take this off and just handhold it. We have seen a lot of different aspects of shooting and covering these events, especially afterward, right? You imagine a camera on a tripod shooting at a house that has a tree in front of it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But when you're talking about the kind of perspective you get when you're in the air, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet, this is what we're talking about, especially right now with this powerful imagery that you're seeing in places like California. There were fires out there. Remember those, right? Yeah. These neighborhoods are in ashes, and it's you cannot get the full complexity and full understanding and view that you do now with drones. And look at that top image. That's what that is. It's a shot of a drone flying over just what was a town or what was a neighborhood, and it's gone. Geez. The second image here is something that I had shot. This is a tornado that rolled through Albany, Georgia. This was earlier this year, and I want to go a little bit more into that in a second. But you know, this is where our hearts break, is when we see these kinds of images from this perspective. You imagine, again, you shoot it with a phone, you shoot it with your camera. It looks bad, but when you really get higher, it really is horrifying. I'm not gonna go bullet by bullet here because I'm gonna keep this short, but this is what I'm talking about. We were in a neighborhood that was very close by. We shot this with a camera, just like the two back there that we're using, right? Everyone's used to seeing those news gathering cameras. That first shot is a house. You say, oh, okay, well, that's terrible. You see a lot of severe damage. That's not great. But when I raised up my drone, I got my drone up a few feet, 20, 30 feet, I realized this entire neighborhood was in shambles. From a storytelling aspect, that opens it up to a completely different level, right? I mean, I think it's safe to say that's where you think, oh my God, this is terrifying. Maybe. There we go. Oops. So, to keep this short, we do not have a drone crew. We do not have a drone department. These guys are definitely, we envy you, because that's amazing. So what we do is we actually buy a lot of the footage that we see across the country that's coming in from our storm chasers. And we're buying them from licensed storm chasers because there's so many stories out there when you're talking about this kind of angle, this kind of view. So from a national perspective, you know, this is where we can really see the country in a very different view, and it's helpful, hopefully, to be able to show that, but it's also quite terrifying. And I hope we keep getting these kinds of images, because I think ultimately it's really helping a lot of folks. It's helping us cover better. It's helping us get folks help and really further that storytelling. So I will shut up. These guys have a lot more to say.
Thank you, Jim. We'll condense the questioning and interaction till after the panelists. And you may have heard me mention, I was told that this is being recorded, so hopefully everyone will be aware of that when they also have questions that they may ask. And they are also asking us panelists to make sure we are always talking into the mics for that reason. Doug. Doug, yes.
You may ask yourself why the media and drones. And the shots that Jim just showed you there, I think the FAA also, and Tony and I just participated in a public safety conference down in Forsyth, Georgia, which the FAA hosted. And one of the things that they emphasized there, and we already knew this, but one of the things that they said publicly was, we know that there is important information that is shown in these drone shots from the media. We know that this the impact of these storms, like Harvey and Irma, are of national significance, and so in that respect, the FAA started with Harvey, and they started to issue ECOAs for the media to fly in areas that there were temporary flight restrictions. An ECOA is an emergency certificate of authorization, because they knew that the media could bring more awareness to what was happening there to people and to the property. And so we have a huge responsibility if we're going to operate under ECOAs in federally restricted airspace to operate safely. And I wanted to show you in our own program at Fox, we've trained so far over 70 pilots. And it's a pretty extensive training that we go through. You have to be nominated by your news organization within Fox. You take an online course, you pass your 107, you spend 3 days in field training, then you have 15 additional hours of flight training, then you have to do a final check flight. And even for our visual observers, we don't just grab somebody and say, hey, don't let me crash. We have people who also take an online course, they pass a knowledge exam, and they complete 2 hours of field training. That is training that far exceeds the FAA requirements under Part 107. And so we've got an obligation to protect the national airspace. We have an obligation to protect our good corporate name. We have an obligation to protect people on the ground. And so this is working very well for us. And as I said, we've trained over 70 pilots at Fox television stations and the Fox News Channel throughout the country. I wanted to show you some video from some of our folks in Florida with Hurricane Irma. And I get to see, I'm part of what's called the Fox Flight Desk, and we approve the flights, and I'm also involved in the training, and it's been fantastic. It was a total team effort by the Fox News Channel and the Fox television stations to bring this about. And it was great to be a part of that team, but it was a huge team that went all the way up to the top of our company, from the COO down to little old me. And so it was a lot of fun. So I get to see a lot of the video, so I pulled some video for you to see. I wanted to show you this video because this is your standard drone video, right? We're flying over the tops of houses that have been ripped up. We're flying over areas that have been flooded. And although this is great video and gives us certainly a broader perspective of what is going on, there's one thing that I thought about with this video. It looks a lot like chopper video.
Yeah.
It looks a lot like news chopper video.
Yeah,
And to me, drones own the airspace from the ground up to the choppers. Actually not quite that high, at only 400 feet. What we're finding in our news coverage is that we're operating at about 150 feet to 200 feet. So tall pine trees in Georgia are, what, about 120 feet or so? So we're operating at treetop level and slightly above. All right, let's see what happens with the next slide. All right, here's the other thing that I noticed. Stories are about people and the events that happen to them. And so oftentimes, and that's why I like this video and these amazing shots, is because they have people in them and how they're impacted by the storms. This is our crew down in Tampa, a pilot named Mike House, who's actually a vice president of creative services for our Fox television station in Tampa, shot this video. Mike is just an excellent pilot, and he's just so good with his imagery. But it shows the impact of the storm on people, not just buildings. And that's one of the things that I've learned in the training that I've been involved in, is we emphasize, stay away from people with your drone. For God's sake, please. And so what our pilots are doing is they're staying away from people, even with their cameras. And we're not capturing images of people and how they're affected. Mike showed me that in Irma with some of his great video, the difference between that first video that I showed you and that involving people. The other great thing about the drone is it gives us proximity to the events. And here's an example of how low he's flying here, just right above the water. We couldn't get that kind of video otherwise. And so the drone gets us right in there to see the devastating impact of the flooding there from Hurricane Irma in Florida. And look at this fantastic shot. Flying right over, and we see the crews working there in knee-high water. Again, with proximity, we see the people involved in the story as well. This is a flooded area along a waterway, and we see the great perspective shots, a flooded backyard at treetop level. Again, here's video showing the impact that it's having on people driving through flooded streets. And I love the shot that we're about to see. You can barely see it right here because of the trees there in the shadows, but there's a person walking there. There he is, walking through his yard. And there's a great shot of him standing in his yard. The drone pulls out to reveal the perspective of his house flooded. Just really powerful imagery.
Wow.
I echo everything he said. Tony from Channel 2, we're part of the Cox Media Group. We have about 12 certified pilots at our shop directly, most of them photographers. I think I'm the only on air. I have a license. Similar operations at our 13 other stations around the country and growing every week. What he talked about, I won't repeat, about owning the space between the ground and the choppers. I think the other thing, especially for our bosses, the biggest impact on the media the drones are having is cost and budget. Especially, I was down in Florida at Irma covering it. I was in Albany during the tornadoes. We have a choice. We can fly our $1,000 an hour 407 down to Albany, take it away for the day, and risk something happening in our 2.5 million population in Atlanta, or I can have a drone in the back of my truck. I'm already there, I pop it up, I get the same footage, or sometimes even better footage, and it costs us basically nothing. And that's how you're going to see drones expand in the media very quickly. We've had helicopters for decades. A lot of the stations in any other cities around Georgia don't have helicopters. It's really having an impact on them. And once we get we're in the crawling stages of the rules right now, I think. And once those get worked out, and we get it worked out with local law enforcement, that they know what we're doing, and we just had an incident a few days ago I can talk about, but once we get past those two hurdles, it's going to be amazing.
All right, so at this point, I want to spend a couple of minutes just sort of with questions for the panel. And many of you may have been to conferences before, and one of the things that we talked about is we didn't want it to be a panel where we ask a question and every single panelist answers basically the question with the same answer. So, if there's someone that feels inclined to answer the questions, feel free. We'll do that for a couple of minutes, and then if you have questions as well, please raise your hand, and I'll come out because I think they want to get it on the mic. So I think I don't know how far this mic will come, but maybe you can walk. If you have questions, perhaps, why don't you, and I'll in about 10 minutes, start building a line right here so that we can get the mic to you. So I guess the first question that I would pose to the panel is that I think you've all presented the case, obviously, for why this is emerging and going to continue to emerge. And I think I heard some of the answers to the question I'm about to ask, but what are the downsides, the negative aspects of drones emerging in the media? If there are any. If it's all positive, fine.
Well, I think partly the rules aren't quite set yet.
Yeah.
And from the law enforcement perspective, when we're up in the air, they don't know if it's us or if it's Johnny Clueless right now.
Right.
And add to the fact their attitude, a lot of times they feel they can control the media more than they can the public. It's creating some conflict right now.
Right.
Those privacy issues, those regulatory issues, who controls it, how high are you going to go, those really need to be hammered out. And as our lawyers say, it's all going to work out. It's probably going to work out in our favor. It's going to take some time. It's going to have to go up to the higher courts, and they point at you very fiercely and say, don't you be the test case. And it's going to take some test cases, and I personally hope it's him, not me, that's the test case.
The other thing I think is that we're crawling, given what Tony had said, we're crawling into this, and respectfully so. We want to be careful. We want to be good stewards of this technology for the benefit of everyone who's operating in the national airspace.
Right.
And so the other thing is we want to be good neighbors too. You know, we fly, my station, in our backyard is the CDC. And our backyard is our practice zone.
Right.
So we want to be good corporate neighbors to the CDC and very respectful of their issues and security and everything. So we don't fly over there, right? We don't even go over there. We don't even act like we're going over there. We mind our own business and we fly safely over our treetops. And that's not a downside, but the downside is just that we're crawling right now.
Right.
And we're all eager to get going and open it up, but it's not the right thing.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking of, but it sounds like it maybe not be as much of an issue as I thought, is perhaps there may be, from fellow journalists or your helicopter pilots and those things. I didn't know if they felt challenged in terms of this.
I'm sure they're not happy.
Yeah.
The helicopter company,
Sure.
we all rent the same, our helicopters come through the same lease company.
Sure.
I think budget perspective, Fox and Cox could easily have gone out immediately and bought 30 drones. That's a drop in the bucket for them.
Sure.
The
Very
price of these
expensive.
things. They could have thrown one in each car back when you got a waiver across the board and done it. I don't know of anybody that even came close to that, because they were crawling, and even some of the companies that are known to push the envelope have not.
Right.
And I think we are crawling, and nobody's wanting to push it and wanting to get it right.
Jim, what about, are there any sort of perspectives or differences? You're working with a company that's dealing more with a national product.
This is something I was just thinking about as you guys were talking about it. You have a department in your companies that is handling this, from everything from actually procuring them and learning how to fly them correctly, and then you're dealing with the legalities of them. But what we have a problem with is because we do not have a department that does that. And we would love to, it'd be great, but because we are not a news, we're not producing general news. So what we have is we're waiting for big events to happen, and that's when we send the guys out. The biggest thing I see is that because we're hiring out, we're outsourcing it, which sounds really awful, doesn't it? I'm outsourcing drone footage.
We do too.
But
Yeah, we
here's the
buy
thing.
some occasionally.
Exactly. And you have very responsible folks who are using it with licenses. They're doing it the right way. They're talking to police, and they're getting their emergency management officials on board. And something I've even done in the field is that, hey, please, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to give them my flight plan, and I'm kind of going to go off the book here a little bit, but just, let's work together. We can't control that. We can't control what someone's going to do. And they're saying, hey, we're working for the Weather Channel. Okay,
Right.
so now all of a sudden, we're the bad guys,
Right.
and we're not being those good corporate stewards to anybody, not even the public. So that's a little freaky,
Yeah.
and something we just need to keep working on. And I think there's that stigma too, that if a drone is in the air, we need to take it down because it's doing something illegal. And this is sort of that public persona that we have to fight too. And I'm with you guys. That's exactly it.
Yeah. So we're talking drones here. Again, remember, hashtag is hashtag Georgia Drone Summit. If you're following or wanting to tweet out some of this good information, make sure you use the hashtag. Since we probably do have in the audience some drone enthusiasts or drone professionals or licensed drone pilots, curious, without giving any of your specific rates, what is a given rate for someone that's outsourced? What does the weather company pay someone that for video? Do you know, or can you give that information? I'm curious about that, just personally curious, but also that might be useful to some of you.
I think it really depends on the photographer and what exactly it is. If you've got some great flooding video that we haven't seen before, or if you see some really great people stories especially, it's a little bit more, but we know anywhere between $200 and $800, per clip.
So it just kind of varies.
It's really clip
I
by
honestly
clip.
don't know.
Yeah.
I purposely stay away from that.
Yeah, and I assume that most.
Smart man.
Yeah, I was curious because, at least in the model that you all are using, obviously it's kind of like Uber. The more drivers or more pilots that are out there, the more access that you have to the news. And so is there a place where, and again, maybe this is the type of information being shared at this summit, where people can register themselves as a pilot to be a news provider? Or do you all just seek? I'm just curious about how this goes because I can see this growing.
I'm curious about you guys too, because this is so new, that even we're beginning to see this as well. But a lot of the chasers, the storm chasers that we use, they have a few people who are licensed on their team, and that's it. That, we don't have a really big resource to find, we can geographically find, someone in Mississippi and also someone who's in Albany, Georgia, or Naples, Florida, or something like that. We don't have a way to do that. So we have to do a lot of networking, last minute,
Exactly, that's what I
we're making
saw.
a lot of phone calls and emails and social media. I wish there was a better way. I don't know how you guys.
I think, at Fox, I think that they have a preferred vendor list. So they have people who, some of these companies operate nationally, and they've proven that they have X amount of insurance, and they do this, and this, and they've established reputation and things like that. And I know that there's a whole policy or a form that they have to fill out that's pretty comprehensive, and for them to be considered.
Right. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, but are there questions from the audience? So go ahead and start making a...
I was actually thinking perhaps you can reiterate our question.
I will do that. In fact, I think that's what they recommended that I do. So I wanted to ask one final question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So we're crawling, and we're in the stage of drones, and at least the weather, or it really is post-weather in many cases, although I can imagine there are some situations in real time. Can you all, as experienced pilots or experienced drone users in this particular capacity, from your own perspective, what do you envision as next? What really would take this to the next level in terms of drone capacity? Is it flying an infrared sensor on the drones? I mean, is it just different type of access? Just your thoughts.
First and most important for us is getting the waivers.
The waivers.
Within Class D. And, as it stands right now, I work mainly out of Gwinnett County in the northern suburbs. Small airport, few operations a day, but it's Class D, has an air traffic control tower. I can't pop my drone 2 inches off the ground within 5 miles of that runway. That takes up a vast majority of the area I'm routinely in every day.
Right.
There are waivers in the process to get that narrowed down, and it's just a matter of getting that through. Local police department, the other day, had a fatal accident on the expressway that runs 100 yards from the runways. They were able to pop their drone up and get shots of the accident for their purpose. I was right there with the same exact drone. I can't go up
Wow.
Why couldn't you go up?
because I don't have the waiver. They were public.
So right now, it sounds like, Tony, that
That's our biggest challenge.
practical challenges, not so much sort of the next great thing in airspace and waivers.
Airspace
Yeah.
issues. We are getting we have the nighttime waivers, getting that through for most of us at least, so that's gonna be solved.
So some of these drones are already flying infrared capacity then, if you're going up at night, or?
No, it's more twilight. And,
Oh, okay.
in urban areas, you can still see
Sure.
quite a bit.
Okay.
And the other is the reaction among law enforcement. And we had a case the other day where a SWAT situation, suburban Atlanta, lady thought it was smart to fire back at a SWAT team coming in her house. She ended up losing. But 3 hours after the fact, all the investigating officers are gone, and we're being kept back, our cameras, so we can't see the house that was involved. 2 of our stations, the CBS and I was on scene, launch our drones at separate times and fly away from the scene across the street, 150 feet above the tall pine trees. Couldn't really get a shot because the sun was coming in, and I was up and landing, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which was controlling the scene, came running over, yelling at us to get those drones down now, or they were going to kick us back a half mile. We were perfectly legal. I was already landing. We didn't say anything, landed my drone, but the Chicago attitude that I got, I called our helicopter crew, which was just coming on board. Told them, come on up. 2,000-3,000 pound helicopter full of Jet A, because it was the start of the morning, 4 blades. Told them to give them a haircut. That's our version. Come in low, come in loud. They came in as low as they legally could. They were making as much noise. A camera that's 1,000 times better than what we got on our drone.
Yeah,
Law enforcement never said a word.
right,
Because they've been used for 2 decades of our helicopters flying over the things.
right.
But when we're down on the ground and we got a drone, and they obviously knew who was flying it, because he came running directly to us. You know, they think they have the authority to land.
So that's an interesting point there, because it really was about a perception when in fact you were getting the same information from the chopper as well.
Far more safe.
Yeah, safely.
Far more safely, I would think.
Right,
than
but
a-
there's a stigma perhaps in some
Right.
people's mind in law enforcement about drones.
And our helicopter,
Yeah.
I guarantee you, woke up everybody
Sure.
within 2 miles,
Yeah,
you know, or,
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, since the last conference that we were at was a public safety conference, and someone in public safety had asked, have you given any thought to coming up with a color scheme for media drones? And my first reaction was, nah, because, you know, ours just are the color that they are as they come out of the box.
Sure.
But the more that I think about this, and then, you know, we've taken to wearing reflective vests on the ground so that we're easily identified. So if somebody wants to run up and tell us to take that drone out of the sky, they can find us. But the more I think about this, you know, if it helps public safety to identify that as a media drone, and perhaps they're okay with it, better to know that it's a media drone as opposed to not a media drone, who's, you know, as we learned at lunch, the 3 C's, careless, criminal, and what was the other? Clueless.
clueless.
Right?
which could apply to some of the media.
Sure, or
I
anybody
think
else.
in practicality, the color coding,
Well-
you know, you can't see the logos on the helicopters.
Well, I mean-
Flying school buses sometimes, but it may be hard to do, but yeah, it's something, because I admit, from the law enforcement perspective, you know, they don't know if that's
Something to
Fox
think about.
5 or, you know, a local neighbor who's mad at what they're doing.
Yeah, sure. I could see an era where you've got for accident scenes, you've got lawyers putting up drones to try to all kinds of various things going on. Good luck with the color coding. As a meteorologist and former president of the AMS, we've been trying to get the TV stations to have some consistency in the color coding on the radar and the warning boxes and things like that as well. And there are challenges even with that. Now, what was your question?
It actually had to do more with research.
Sure.
The potential for drones in weather research.
Okay.
And it sounds like a lot of the stuff that is happening now is the storm chasers kind of after the fact, or kind of during to after safety.
Yeah.
And not knowing enough about drones and like how many mile per hour winds can they actually handle and like all that kind of stuff. I just wondered if you guys could reveal any.
I can actually
about research.
handle that one. So yeah, I mentioned I do the show on the Weather Channel. We actually had some guys on the show, Weather Geek show, I guess last year, that are flying drones. Actually, well, this is a group out of students actually out of I guess it's Kennesaw State, and that was Southern Polytechnic then. We're trying to fly drones into supercell thunderstorms to try to get real-time information on the supercell environment that produces tornadoes. Now, there's some challenges with that. A more established group out of the University of Nebraska, where my colleague Dr. Tom Mode is from, and also University of Colorado, actually have National Science Foundation funding, and they are flying high-altitude drone systems in the near-storm environment, and in some cases over small convective or cloud systems, trying to get information as well. Tom, you were actually mentioning even there have been drones up over Greenland. You were talking earlier about that as well. Tom studies Greenland, so I know that there are activities ongoing in using drones. I think some of the same challenges we've heard from our media colleagues are at play right now in terms of waivers and access to certain places. But there is an effort to try to use these drones in the near storm environment, at least for weather research. I don't know if you know of any
There was
others.
something actually really interesting. We had a guy who was a drone operator as Irma moved through Naples. He actually said when you're in the eye of the hurricane, it's dead calm.
Yes.
And you could actually fly. And so he tried. He got up a little bit. Tried. That didn't work. But to that point, that would be a great way if you could somehow, you know.
Well, I can imagine you put a drone. One of the things in meteorological research you're always wanting information on is what we in meteorology call the boundary layer, the sort of lowest first kilometer. And I can imagine, for example, in that situation, what you all are familiar with weather balloons. We send a weather balloon up to get profiles of temperature. If we had a drone that had some type of sensor capability, you could profile the lower atmosphere. So that would certainly be interesting. And I could imagine that being of use in other aspects as well. So.
I'm really, I don't think that there's anybody in Atlanta who's covered more hurricanes than Tony and I have in our career here in Atlanta. But I've never flown a drone, not in a hurricane, but in hurricane coverage. So
Just aftermath and early, sorry.
I'm really interested to see how much you can get pre-storm with the winds and everything. You know,
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
winds would be the most substantial factor.
Yeah, I think
before the
it-
precipitation sets in.
Yeah, I think I was going to say for folks like you, I know you do mostly a post-assessment, but I can imagine, I mean, we know that there are certain creeks or places in Atlanta they're going to
Yeah.
flood. So to have sort of
Absolutely.
pre-imagery and post-imagery,
Yeah.
it's a sort of, and you could sort of derive rates of rise, and that can infer a rain rate. I mean, there are certainly
That's a
things you
really
could
good
do.
idea.
So, yeah. Other questions? But so to answer your question, I think that we're going to increasingly see that. Yeah. Other questions? Quiet group?
And I think from the media perspective, the next
Thomas.
year will be interesting in weather coverage, because this is the first, I think this summer, maybe spring, was the first time we really had our programs up and running. So when you get to the winter type stuff this winter, and really next spring, where up until this summer, we couldn't really pre-position our drones, because we only had one operator, and he had to be a commercial pilot to begin with, you know? So now we can pre-position some of our drones, you know, at the spots we know some weather's coming in, so
Yeah,
it
it's-
will be very interesting.
I'm thinking about snowpocalypse. A couple of years ago, all 2 inches.
That would have been-
That would have been a useful thing for drone. But I keep coming back to infrared because I am a researcher at heart, and so one of the things that just came to my mind is, one of my current students is looking at road surface temperatures. Again, if you had some kind of capacity to understand from the drone perspective where you're seeing roads above a certain temperature, again, right now, I guess what I'm saying is many of the drones right now are really passive, and so you're sending them up and they're sort of imaging. But if there's capacity to, I come from a world of NASA, that's where I was before I came to UGA, and we're flying all kinds of satellite sensors that are doing really cool things from space back to Earth. And so you keep imagining whether we're going to be able to have some of these kinds of capabilities on drones as I'm sitting here listening to the conversation. So.
Unfortunately, thermal imaging is very expensive.
It's expensive, and it probably has too many
Kind of
minutes.
like
Exactly.
out of our range.
Exactly. That's why I said I think it's it's something now that's sort of in the sort of non-practical stage, but 10 years from now, who
No,
knows?
but it'd be fascinating to see.
Yeah. Dr. Madden.
So we do more environmental monitoring, and we're doing research so we can plan our flights. And one thing we've had trouble with, or is an issue, is the temperature, the outdoor temperature, and we're in the southeast and it's hot. So sometimes the iPads stop working, or the batteries overheat. But you don't have that luxury. You have to respond to something, I think, when it happens. So how do you deal with it?
And let me repeat the question so that they get it on camera. This is, by the way, this is Professor Marguerite Madden, who's the director of the Center for Geospatial Research at the University of Georgia in the Geography Department. So she's asking about environmental conditions. They do a lot of environmental remote sensing and drone activity. How do you deal with environmental conditions when you actually have to respond?
Well, it's particularly a problem for our crews in Florida and Arizona, the heat, with their tablets that they're using with the drones. We started our program with Android tablets. We found that they didn't handle the heat very well. They were crashing a lot. We went to iPads, and we had a similar problem with the iPads. We looked at cooling units for the iPads, things that you could strap on them with fans to keep them cool. The thing that we're most interested in now with the heat is the new monitors that, I don't know what types of drone you're flying there.
DJI,
Yeah, so one of the new things that's come out by DJI is their new monitor, the Crystal Sky monitor. So we're interested to see how well those things perform in the heat. So far, they've performed pretty good, but we got them toward the end of summer rather than in July and stuff when our crews were really affected by the heat. Heat does not affect the drone as much, although you want to be careful with the batteries and stuff like that. You wouldn't want to leave the batteries out in the sun or in a hot car. Now with the cold, that's been an issue as well. I tried to fly after an ice storm last winter. The temperature was 22 degrees. We were flying an Inspire 1. I was keeping the batteries in the floorboard of the truck with the heat on, and blast in the heat, and I would take a warm battery right out of the car, put it into the drone, fire the drone up, and immediately get the cold warning. And I just was not comfortable flying with that warning. I was told you could go ahead and fly with it, and I'm like, no, that's all right, just to get a bunch of ice on the trees. I won't. So we didn't. So the other thing that I'm interested in finding out is, since that event, we have gone to an Inspire 2, and the Inspire 2 has an onboard heating unit for the batteries. So we're interested to see how that works in the cold. But heat and cold on the batteries and the tablets are an issue for everyone.
Yeah, we've been working on the cold issue, even on our ENG cameras, for years. We doubled up on the amount of batteries we carry for that purpose. And equipment-wise, the biggest problem we face is our tablets blanking out, heat or cold.
What do you use? What kind of tablets?
Androids, we've tried iPads, and actually the most consistent, it's harder to see, but that's why I have a 6 Plus, is we found these are the most stable. It's harder to see what you're looking at because you're a smaller screen, but it's better than some of the Android apps and stuff. But never had a flyaway yet, but I've sure lost my screen several times while my drone is up there, yeah.
All right. Yes, sir.
You mentioned you'll use the Inspire. Is that what you all use as well, or is it?
We have a couple Inspires in the field deployed. We Phantom 4s is what I carry in my truck, mainly because the Phantoms we can operate with just a visual observer and one. On the Inspires, at least the ones we have, I think they're all the same.
Right.
You know, it requires a 2-person operation for a camera, and in our immediate get out there immediately, it's just a lot easier to have them.
Right.
If you're looking for a drone to perform well in the wind, we have had tremendous success with the Mavic Pro.
Yeah,
Really?
The Mavic Pro eats wind.
it handles well.
The Inspire 1 hates the wind. It hates a windy forecast. It trembles in its case. The Phantom does okay. The Inspire 2 does better, but the Mavic Pro has just been terrific. The drone that costs the least and is the smallest is just a little workhorse, just a little champ. I'm just amazed by it every time we put it up.
Interesting. A little inside tip there for some of you. Perhaps this will be the last question. Go ahead.
Not a question, it's more a comment, but I was in Drones 101 the other day, and they said that there's a new Mavic that's just come on the market, the Platinum. And if you go and look at it, it's got a 30-minute battery, and it's quieter. And they're saying that CNN was in the same group there, and they're saying that it's their workhorse.
Yeah, it surprised. I shot the bridge collapse here in Atlanta. Everybody remembers that.
Yeah.
And we had I had the choice that day. I brought the Inspire 1 and the Mavic, and the winds that day were 26 at PDK, and gusting to about 32.
Yeah.
And I took the Mavic, and it was fantastic. It flew great. I was very proud of it, and that was our first breakout big story, was that bridge collapse. I often say that the first day belonged to the news helicopters, and the next 45 days belonged to the drones.
To the drones.
And that little Mavic was just a champ.
And the first day belonged mainly because we were straddling the line of Class D and not. I don't think you could get any closer.
I originally thought it was in Class
I
D.
did too
When
when
they
I
asked
first
me,
looked at it.
I looked at it and I said, nah, we can't fly. And then
But
the
that
next
was
day, somebody
so
smarter
close.
than me said,
Yeah.
yeah, we can fly.
We can fly there.
But that's another one where, you know, if it had been literally 200, 300, 400 yards closer to PDK,
You couldn't have. Yeah.
couldn't have done it. Helicopters could have at whatever cost. But
I don't know. I don't know if he's in the room, but our colleague Tommy Jordan, and it's maybe Sergio or Dr. Mann can add. I mean, even here in UGA, I mean, I don't know if we have some of these issues close to Ben Epps Airport. Yeah, I would imagine we do. Yeah.
Well, in fact, we just applied for an authorization to fly the old Athens cemetery.
Okay,
I
interesting.
mean, it's understandable, you don't want drones flying at the end of the runway, understand that. But 5 miles away, you know, we're flying at treetop level. If there's a plane at treetop level, we got a bigger problem.
Right, oh, absolutely,
You know, that's kind of our point.
absolutely. Okay, yes, and I'll repeat your question, yeah.
Real quick, everything here has been really focused on rotary wing, quadcopters primarily. What about VTOL fixed wing aircraft to give you the persistency that you're looking for over an area? So there goes the time problem that you're having when you're trying to wait for the SWAT team. Obviously, that situation is a
No, I
little
see.
different, but you understand my question. With VTOL and the benefit of fixed wing providing you the persistency, do you think that that's going to be a big game changer?
At our last,
Let me repeat the question first so they can get it on video. So the question is about, what about, we've been focusing more on sort of propeller-based drones, or what about more fixed-wing systems? Before Tony jumps in, the systems that I was talking about, for example, flying in storm environment, the students from Kennesaw, they were using a fixed-wing system, but go ahead.
at our last conference we were at, one of the biggest operators of drones right now in the state of Georgia is Georgia Power. And Gulf Company, Southeast as a whole. They had representatives there, and I spent a lot of time talking with their director. Especially for them, that's going to be the key, where they can get out of line of sight, and they're already working on that. I mean, their hope is basically almost every lineman out there, or every crew, will have one of those to be able to check. Don't have to put them up in the basket near the hot lines, you can fly over.
If I could do.
From the media standpoint, once we get out of visual line of sight, they'll probably be, I haven't heard any discussion in our shop now until we can get out of visual, then that'll be replace our helicopters.
Fixed wing would definitely give us the advantage of duration of flight. It also would probably give us an advantage with the type of camera we could put on the drone, especially with, you know, if we got into situations where they said media drones can only operate at 200 feet from now on, or 300 feet from now on. My only concern about a fixed wing is the lack of vertical takeoff. You need a lot of space to take off and land with a fixed wing. Right, so if that proved, I wouldn't rule anything out.
So I want to make sure, because I didn't quite catch what you were saying too. So these VTOL systems are more like the Osprey Marine system, where it takes off like a helicopter and then becomes a fixed wing system. And there are drones like that out there.
Exactly, and
Interesting.
that's what we're working on at the University of Florida, is developing these things so that you can have the endurance of the fixed wing benefits,
Right.
the increased payload capacity to carry multiple, your thermal, your cam, your visual, and your LiDAR, whatever it is, all at once. So you're increasing your capacity, you're increasing your runtime, and you can still land and take off in the small, limited place you have. And so that's been kind of.
What's your name?
Matt Burgess.
Okay, this is Matt Burgess from University of Florida. I just want to make sure we got that on record in case people want to know who you were.
Yeah. All I can say is hurry.
Please.
I've been in this for 10 years, and I've watched the whole thing progress. So, I mean, this is really important to me from a weather perspective, because weather influences every single drone flight.
Right.
And so, working with the National Weather Service and folks at NOAA, they're interested in or helping us to help you. And so that's why I was just interested in hearing that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think on that note, I would like to thank all of our panelists for taking a little time out to come be a part of this, and thank you all as well. Thank you.